Welcome to Miss Fee the Storyteller podcast. I am so excited today. You all know I always have my meet and greets before I have guests to come on the show, and that gives me an opportunity to get to know them. And one of the things I like about my guest is she's a storyteller. So you know I love anybody who likes to tell stories, whether they tell a story or write the story. I love them. I love storytellers. So Michel Capots. Did I say it right?
You
Yes, I'm
said
on
it
a
right.
roll. I am on a roll. I've been practicing anyway. So, Michelle, please tell my listeners about yourself.
Okay, great. My name is Michel Capots, and I am a transformational coach and speaker and storyteller with a focus on mental wellness and resilience.
Good, good. That's what I like, resilience, helping us to keep going and moving at it. So, because we are storytellers and all my listeners, if you've listened to my podcast in the past, you know, normally what we do is we normally talk about one of my stories first, and then my guest shares their story. Well, I decided let's turn things around. Let's turn them up a little bit. So, what we're going to do is Michelle is going to share her story. She's going to share a story first, and then I'm going to share a little bit of my story with you. So, Michelle, please go ahead and tell my listeners your story.
Okay, great. Well, the story I'm going to share is actually a story about when I was diagnosed with depression, which really was the onset and changed everything for me. So at the time, I was in my late 20s. I was a newspaper reporter and I lived above an architect's studio, and it had high ceilings and bay windows with lots of light. My roommate had painted a sunflower on the living room wall. And my very favorite thing about the apartment was my purple front door. I had a purple front door. But during one summer, I lost all enthusiasm and excitement for everything. I stopped eating. I had
Mm.
difficulty sleeping. I didn't want to join my friends for dinners. I didn't want to be around anybody at all. And I only felt safe, and I use that word. I only felt safe when I closed the door behind me at night and crawled into bed. Um, Eventually, my work started to suffer. I couldn't concentrate on interviews, I couldn't focus, and I had to take a leave of absence from work. My family started to worry about my mind frame, so I had to move out that amazing apartment with the purple
Oh,
door and move into my old bedroom in the home I grew up in.
oh,
And then I
wow.
really felt like a failure.
Yeah.
My friends were getting married, they were buying houses, and I couldn't even drag myself out of bed. 2 months passed, and slowly, with medication and therapy, I started to get better. But on the day I was due to return to work, I didn't want to go. Everybody knew where I was and what had happened. And I was embarrassed. I was
Yeah.
even a little ashamed. This was a while ago, before depression was as normalized, but I was embarrassed. I was ashamed. And I pulled into the parking lot that day, and I worked in a strip mall. And I sat in the car for a really long time trying to get the courage to go inside. And when I opened the door, it felt like a ton of bricks. And
Mm.
unfortunately for me, it had one of those bells that ding anytime someone enters. And
Oh,
everybody looked up. and I
Yeah.
froze. I wanted to turn around and run back out the door. But Marcy, our administrative assistant, ran over and she gave me a hug. And I felt my body soften and relax. And then she whispered something that told me everything was going to be all right. All she said was, I take Prozac too. And
Oh,
by letting
wow.
me know that I wasn't alone, it gave me the strength and courage I needed to go inside, to take that step inside. And it was powerful. And my story technically should have ended there, but it didn't.
Mm.
Several years later, there was another depression, not as severe, but this time it was followed by mania. And I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder after several manic episodes, one of which I ended up in the hospital. And I started to feel like, what's that game? Whack-a-mole, 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 where every time I got well, something pops
Yeah, and
up
you
and
take the
you
little
chop
ball and
it.
you hit it.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah,
you
yeah.
hit it back
Yeah.
down. That's what I felt like. Every time I got well and
Mm.
popped up, I was getting knocked back down. And that feeling of when the bell dinged that day, that moment of fear and of utter insecurity and feeling less than, that became a regular everyday experience. And I didn't even realize it. Without knowing it, I let self stigma and my feelings of low self worth seep into every area of my life. I had given up writing. I didn't have that newspaper job at the time. And I found myself in a series of unfulfilling jobs and too many toxic relationships. I was
Mm.
completely disconnected from my authentic self. I saw people around me that had the things I wanted in life, and I told myself that it would work for them, but it'll never work for me. I will never have the job I love. I will never have a healthy
Mm.
relationship. I told myself I could never be that person I really wanted to be, and I believed those thoughts. I started to think that I was broken. And that became my comfort zone. That became a
Wow.
comfortable place for me to be. And it kept me stuck. I stayed stuck.
Yeah.
But eventually, or during that time, I met a woman who became my mentor. And she taught me the power of an old war saying, run toward the sound of the cannon, which in effect means run towards your fears,
Mm-hmm.
run
Mm-hmm.
towards the things that are holding you back instead of away from them. And at that point, my comfort zone had become too uncomfortable to stay in. I couldn't,
Mm.
I wanted out of there. And I knew the only way to do what she suggested was to look within. So I learned how to question my thoughts, to question the thoughts that I was telling myself and the feelings that created them. And when I went deep to the roots, to where it began, I could see that I was never broken. I was never broken. It was
Yes.
only my perception that was
Yes.
broken. And when I realized that, that's when everything in my life changed.
Oh, I love that. Wow. Now, can you tell that she's a storyteller? Don't you just love it? Oh my God, I love hearing your story. And my story is kind of similar. I was working in this doctor's office and they hired a new manager for the doctor's office. And they had some new doctors that came on, some new staff. And so it was a lot of newness going around. Well, over time, the manager, the manager's way of managing started to become a problem. Now, initially, everybody liked him. He, made sure everybody was okay. He was really nice, and it was going well. But then we started to notice favoritism towards certain people, and certain people were able to get away with things that other people were not. Other people were written up, other people were talked to harshly. Um, but then there were some people who did the same things and nothing was done, and it was very noticeable. One particular thing got out, and it should have never gotten out, was one of the nurses house sitted for the manager. And if you know anybody that works in anywhere with your manager, that is crossing the line because he is your boss and you are an employee. And I don't know if she let it slip or she just wanted everyone to know that, she had this relationship with the manager. Now, he was married with children, but she wanted us to know, she had keys to his house and she was house sitting and all that. Anyway, so over time, things really began to get bad at work. And it got so bad that one day the door opened and a representative from HR just popped up. And we were all like, what happened? Did somebody say anything? Because one side, they really wanted to go to HR. It was just talk. The other side didn't know anything about all the talk. So, I heard all the talking and everything, and I felt like, HR needs to know because it's so toxic that a lot of us don't even want to come into the building. I mean, it's so funny because when you would drive up, you would see people sitting in their cars till the very last minute to walk in. You would see
Mhm.
some people praying, some people with their heads down, like, oh my God, I don't want to go up in there. You would see it. I was one that would sit in the parking lot and pray, because I'm a God girl. I'm like,
Yeah.
Lord, please help me because I have to go in here and I just don't want it. And so basically, they came in and they called us individually and they wanted to talk to us because they had heard some things and they warned us that, not warned us, they I won't say promise, but they convinced us that nothing would happen to you if you tell the truth. That's what was told. They wanted us to tell the truth. And they had two people in the room, one person to witness whatever was said and everything. So we go in and we share. Now, I was smart enough to know not to share everything because just because somebody says nothing's going to happen to you doesn't mean that is not going to happen to you. So I shared a small piece. And basically, I just said something to the fact that some people are being treated differently than others. And it's very well
Mhm.
known. And that is something that probably should be addressed because we should all be treated equally. And then I said something else, and they asked me a couple of questions I answered. So after that, about 2 weeks later, we had to have a staff meeting. And based on all the information and everything that had they collected from all the employees, we had this big meeting. Everybody had to come. They were nice enough to feed us lunch, because they was like, we're gonna feed you all, because of some things that we're gonna say. So, and our manager had to be there, everybody, staff, doctors had to be there. Everybody, it was mandatory to keep your job. You had to be there. So we go in and they stand up and they talk and they share some things. Everything, I will say this. There were some major good things that happened, but then there were some things that just went under. It was almost as if HR was like, we're not going to touch that until something really happens. That's the way I received it.
Mhm.
But the biggest thing that came out of it was that our manager had to go to classes to learn how to be a manager. He had to go to mandatory training, to get some more training, for his position. Um, and then there were a couple of nurses who had favors. You know, they didn't say any names or anything. They kind of addressed that issue, basically letting us know that no one would be treated above anyone else. And so that was one of the things that I liked, but I was very disappointed that the fact that they didn't address everything, because there were several things that there were a lot of people complaining about that they just didn't address. And you could see our faces, when the meeting ended, we all looking around like, they're not going to address that. They're not going to address that. What? They didn't even say anything about that. You could see all of our faces, but, at least it was deemed that, our manager needed to get some help. But it was to the point where people were really needing to go to therapy. It was to the point where people, like I said, just did not want to come to work. And like you talked about the bell, when the bell rung, when you walked into the office and you felt like, it's the same feeling as soon as you walk through the door to the time clock, your hands are shaking like, oh my God. And you don't even want to, just put the card in and, to go ding. And then once it go ding, it's like, oh, hell, now I have to go out here on the floor. So yeah, but I learned a lot from that job. I really did learn a lot for the job. And the one other thing that I will say about this particular job is this, that they did not honor their word when they said that they promised you that nothing would happen to you if you share everything. They did not honor their word when it came to certain people. That's all I'm gonna say
Mm,
about HR, and that is very sad, because those are the people
yeah.
that you're supposed to be able to trust. But now that we shared our stories, we're going to talk a little bit. We're going to talk about some things. And, I love your story, and I love the way that you shared how you felt, because oftentimes we tell stories and we talk about different things, but we really don't talk about how we feel. And
Mm,
sometimes our feelings, we allow our feelings to manifest things to reality. And that's kind of like what you did. You were going through feelings and everything, and you allowed it to manifest to, oh, I'm not, worthy or anything. So how long did it take you to get to that point where you said, okay, your mentor? How long was it before the second, I believe, depression and your mentor?
Um, it was a little while, probably about a year, maybe a little longer, that I had really struggled with those feelings. I think that, and this goes a little bit to the feelings, is there's a really big difference between mental health and mental wellness. And
Yes.
I think that mental health is the diagnosis. It involves medication, therapy, doctors. The mental health, in my opinion, is that aspect.
More like clinical.
Clinical, exactly. The mental wellness for me is the process itself. It's the steps you take to achieve it. So maybe it's the journey, maybe it's meditation, exercise, eating nutritiously, but it's more than that for me. It what I have to do daily and to practice, and something that I've worked with others on, and it goes back to what I talked about in the story, is being able to look within and to look under the hood. So to identify the feeling of fear or the feeling of uncomfortability. So embracing that unworthiness in effect that I talked about before. And that's what Run Toward the Sound of the Cannon represents for me now. It's feeling the fear as a way to transmute it. And that's part of the process for mental wellness. Researchers have found that it only takes 90 seconds for a feeling to pass through the body. That's it, 90
Mm-hmm.
seconds. Anything longer than that shows we're looped in the story. We're reinforcing the story. And if you think about two ducks, how many times have we seen ducks on the water, on the pond, get into a squabble, get into a fight? And they fight, they separate, they immediately shake their feathers, and they sail on. But we don't do that.
That's true.
We hold on to it and think, we would say, I can't believe he just came into my space like that. How could he do that? And we'd say it
Mm-hmm.
over and over and
Mm-hmm.
over again, where they let the energy pass through, release it, and let it go. And we can train ourselves to do the same thing.
So would you say that you learned a lot of that from your mentor? You know,
I've
once
I've learned a lot of that from my mentor and other coaches that I've had and I've worked with. Um, that really she taught me Run Toward the Sound of the Cannon, which then for me meant accepting my mental illness. At
mm-hmm.
that point, it simply meant accepting and facing that I had a mental illness. And now, Run Toward the Sound of the Cannon has taken on a whole new level for me, which is really embracing it and feeling it um, further as a way to free it. And that I learned over the years.
Well, the reason why I asked that question is because I want people to realize that sometimes you do need someone, a mentor, a therapist. You can't do it alone because you're trapped in your own thoughts and the way that you're processing things. And so you need help. You need someone to help you to somebody to see the whole picture. Because sometimes it's kind of like if when you're in a bad relationship, you can't see it, but everybody else can see it, and when you're in it, you can't see it. So that's why I wanted to make sure that people understood that having someone, coaches, mentors, anything is so key to helping you to get out of whatever it is in you. And what I love something that you just said, because I have this post-it right here.
Mhm.
And what the post-it says is no conversations in your head. And what that tells me is when something happens, it's kind of like what you just said, you know, feelings come, they pass to your body in just a few seconds. We stop them because we want them to stay there because we want to sit in it. And
Exactly.
I had a situation that happened to me, and that conversation I made, it was like a whole conversation in my head, and I wouldn't let it go. And it actually made me sick because I made such a huge thing out of this small thing. And when I realized what I did, and that was through prayer, meditation, you know, praying and asking God to help me with it. And it was simple. Just don't have the conversation in your head. When it comes up, just shut it down. Because that whatever happened has happened. It is now in the past. If you need to go back and apologize, do that. But just let it go, just like you said. Isn't it amazing how just simple little tools or just simple little things can just change your life?
Absolutely. And we can get so looped in the story. And then we are the ones that reinforce it. We tell it over and over and
Mhm.
over again until it gets bigger and bigger. And that's what had happened with that bell. is with the self stigma, I just repeated over and over again the negative messages to myself that I wasn't good enough until I started to believe them. But I love what you just said. And it's so important to note that we often can't see it in ourselves. It was my
Mhm.
first coach, the first coach I ever had, who called me resilient. And I had never thought of that. I would have never considered myself resilient, but she saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. And it's so important to share with someone else. If you're
Mm.
in a tough space, share your story. That's where we find our strength, is sharing with others. Sharing our story with each other is when we start to heal from it.
And that's why I love being a storyteller. That's why I love the format of my podcast, because basically we are sharing stories, and I'm sure that there's someone out there listening to this podcast and they probably said, you know what, I felt like Michelle before, or I felt like Valeria, aka Miss V, or they find themselves in our story. And if we never share our stories, we don't understand how powerful stories are. It can really help people when people see that you've gone through something and you made it through. The first thing they want to do is, how did you make it through? What happened? You went through all of that. So what did you do? And with that said, Michelle, if you saw someone, because I feel like, because I've been through so much, oftentimes I can see me in other people, and
Mhm.
my heart just wants to go to them and just help them. So if you were to see someone that you felt like, oh my God, that's me, that's where I was, what would you tell them? What would you tell them to help them?
I would tell them that a lot of the work I do is around self stigma and self worth. So if I were to see someone that was feeling unworthy or
Mhm.
full of the fear that I felt, the most important thing to realize is you never have to stay there. I didn't
Mhm.
know that. I stayed there for too long because it became my comfort zone. But you never have to stay there. You can always get out. And when we are able to connect with our independent worth, independent of a diagnosis or a job or a relationship. But when we're able to connect with that, outside experiences, outside triggers aren't able to hold us back because we learn that it doesn't mean anything about us. It's just the mind. And
Mm.
when we realize that, that is when we start to be able to be free.
Yeah. One of the things for me when I see someone, um, kind of like the way that I used to be very shy, didn't do a lot of talking, kept to myself. When I see them, the first thing I do is I try to make them smile or laugh. That's the first thing that I do. But usually I invite them into my space because I want them to feel that it's a safe place for them. And whatever they want to talk about, whatever they want to do, is safety here. And I remember being at a function, and it was like a group of ladies, and it was about, I guess, about 15 of us. We had did like a brunch, and we were all talking, and one of the ladies got offended by something that someone else said. And some people left, and it was about 8 of us left over, and I didn't realize how it hurt her. And as she was sharing, she said, and I've never forgotten this, and I'm so glad she shared. She said that she didn't feel like she was heard when she was talking. The person
Yeah.
talked over her. She didn't feel like she was heard. I knew exactly how she felt. And so as we continued our conversation, it all geared towards her because we wanted her to feel safe in a place. And I put my hand on the table and I looked her right in her eyes and I said, I want you to know that you have been heard today. We have all heard you and we accept you. We accept everything about you. Little did I know she was gonna bust out crying because that's exactly what she needs. But it was kind of like you when you never heard something before, like resilience. You're like, oh my God, she wanted to know that she was being heard, and I felt like she needed to hear it, because we just think, well, she been heard. She knows she been heard. We've been sitting here listening. No, 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 no. I told her, I said, we hear you. And she just cried and she just cried. And it was almost like a weight being lifted over her. I finally found people that hear me and accept
Mhm.
me even if I'm wrong. So I really
Mhm.
do. I love it. I love what you do and how you go and you help people. And that's what I love. When you go through things in your life and you get delivered or you get healed from it, and then you go and give back. You give back to other people by helping them. So, with that said, please tell us, if we're out there and we're looking for you, if we need information or anything, where can we find you? Where can we, if we need to talk to you, where can they find Michelle?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you can find me on my website, which is michellecapots.com. I'm a 1L Michelle. And also on Instagram, I have two Instagram accounts. One is michellecapots.com spelled out, DOTCOM. And the other is Michelle_Capots. And I would love, excuse me, I would love to hear from you. I'd love to hear from all of you.
Yes, and one other thing I forgot to mention is that not only is Michelle is a storyteller, but she's also a writer and she's been published. Now, I asked her before we started, if we could find her writings, and she said it would be a little bit different to find it. But the point is, we have been graced with an author who has been published in, oh, let me find it, the Washington Post magazine, Marie Claire, the Tribune Review. So we have been honored to have her as our guest for the show. So thank you so much, Michelle, for being here. Thank you for sharing your story. And I'm sure that there's someone out there that is going to resonate with your story, and if that person needs to, that they'll be able to go to the notes and find you, because sometimes you just need one person. And if that one person is you, I would be thrilled. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I loved our conversation.
Yes, all right.